How should the Vikings approach this offseason? We've been talking about mock drafts. We've been talking about a bunch of players with our SKOL Search series. But how should the Minnesota Vikings handle this process of acquiring talent? It's not just as simple as acquiring the best players. You always want to do that. You have constraints with free agency and then the NFL draft paired with the salary cap. It's not always easy. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about one of my many Viking-centric mock drafts over the course of the next few months, exploring different scenarios that could happen come April. Welcome to the Real Forno Show.
Welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by Tyler Forness, the managing editor of USA Today's Vikings Wire, writer for the College Football Network, publisher of Substack Run In Shooter, host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, as well as a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Real Forno Show. I am your host, Tyler Forness. With me, as always, in the top right corner is producer Dave. Dave, it's an interesting conversation today because we're not talking about anything super specific. We're talking about big picture. We're talking about a broad strategy for the Minnesota Vikings. And it's about how to acquire talent, because it's not as simple as I want that guy. We're not talking about the schoolyard here. We're talking about real constraints within the process that the Vikings need to go through in order to acquire players. So it's going to be a really fun one today, and I'm kind of excited to dive into it.
Good. Me too. Let's do this.
All right. So let's have the conversation with the Minnesota Vikings. And this conversation can really go tenfold. It can go multiple different ways. You can have it talking about free agency. You can have it talking the draft, like both ways. Like you can acquire really good talent. So right now, the Minnesota Vikings have 52 players under contract. So the top 51 is $219 million. Okay. That's including dead money from Kirk Cousins, including dead money from Danielle Hunter, not including potentially moving on from Harrison Smith. So there are different ways that the Vikings can clear cap space. They can push money out from TJ Hawkinson's contract into future years. They can do that with Byron Murphy. They could extend guys like Harrison Phillips, Marcus Davenport. He's technically on a voided contract, so you can actually do an extension with him. Like there are ways to clear out to clear money. There are also ways to be able to kind of bring get the cap number into a much healthier spot. So how
by
they
healthier? Right now, there's what? Close to, if you take Davenport, Hunter, Cousins, there's 50 plus million dead cap being accounted for. That's 20%-ish of available spending. That 20% would help make this team look a whole lot better if they weren't in this situation already.
Yeah. And obviously, it's not ideal. We knew that this was going to be a factor for the first few years of adofo-mensah's tenure because of the contracts that he inherited. And Rick Spielman towards the end, and it's hard to really blame him because he was trying to save his job. It's a really weird situation when you're a general manager. You're always trying to prepare for the future. But if you don't prepare for now enough, you will lose your job and you won't get to utilize those future assets. So it's a balancing act. And when you have these conversations about kind of what to do and how to get these contracts structured, you have to determine how much you want to go into the future and how much you want to go now. And it can be a really difficult proposition, like the Harrison Smith contract. 4 years, $64 million for a guy who is already on the wrong side of 30 feels like that's like a Rolex gold watch contract. Thanks for everything you've done. We know you'll be pretty good, but we also know that you are not going to be good enough to have actually continuously earned this contract while you're playing on it. And that's kind of where we're sitting right now. So the Vikings wanted to move on from him. $7.8 million in dead cap. Kind of frustrating, right? Like, it would be nice if you could just cut bait with him and have minimal to no dead cap at all. But that's not the situation we're in. And some of it was Kwesi adofo-mensah doing it to himself with like the Kirk Cousins contract, the Danielle Hunter contract. They gave him that raise. But that raise, in my opinion, was always to bring him back. So if they bring him back, it's fine. So how do the Vikings structure things for now and later? Because that's a really difficult task to be able to do both. Well, you can do a few roster moves here and there. You can extend Justin Jefferson and bring his cap hit down like $11-12 million. You can move on from Harrison Smith, which will adjust his cap hit around $12 million. And right there, you've doubled your cap space just with two moves. And if you want to bring down Kirk Cousins or bring back Kirk Cousins, if it's at the right price, the right deal, you won't have to increase that cap hit by all that much, but you'll still have to pay the piper. That, like, the thing with salary cap is when you have dead money, it means the money has already been paid to the player. Yeah, like signing bonus just gets spread out over the course of the contract. It's just a way to make the player happy now because they get cash now, but you have to pay the piper at some point. So figuring out how to maneuver with all of these things is going to be a really interesting process. And it's when you talk about the NFL draft, you're going to get free agency first. And even though we're having a lot of NFL draft conversations, I thought it was important to have this one because with the NFL draft, you have to do the right thing with free agency. And the whole point of free agency is to fill holes. Whole point of the NFL draft is to acquire good talent. Now, the thing with free agency is a lot of time you're going to pay market value. Sometimes you can get a deal, you can save a few $1 million.
Not early in free agency, though.
No, you're going to pay top of the market. But the thing with free agency is you're getting guys that you feel are known commodities. So, like Danielle Hunter, he's 30 years old. You know he's a very good pass rusher. So if you're signing him to a long-term contract, you already know what he is. And because you already know what he is, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable giving him those kind of assets. Now, when you're talking about the NFL draft, you're drafting relative unknowns because they've never played a snap in the NFL. And it's hard to pick a guy and be like, all right, you're going to go start day one for us. A lot of rookies will start day one, but it's not an advantageous situation for the team or the player more often than not. So when you have these conversations and you are having these discussions to try and parse these things out, it's better to approach free agency like this. I have holes at 5 spots. I'm going to get players at those 5 spots. So then the second I go into the draft, I don't have to worry about drafting those 5 spots. I still can. Like, I can go in there relatively carefree. Oh, and we're going to talk about this with my mock draft. A position that I don't necessarily need is there, but he's far and away the best player on the board. I can feel pretty comfortable taking that player. And there are going to be some interesting prospects, especially in the defensive line, as far as who's going to be available in free agency. That's going to be really interesting. And I want to at least mention this in conversation because you have to look at things from a cumulative standpoint when you're a general manager. For us, it's about, oh, I want this guy because he looks like he could be a superstar. Yes, but how do you make it so you can get that guy and still have a balanced football team? That's the big question here. Those are the questions you're going to have to answer as a general manager because you are the one shaping the roster. You are the one getting things all situated. And it's going to be a fun process for the Vikings because they only have that $24 million in cap space. And that's not including the draft picks that you'll have to sign, including at likely the 11th overall pick. Let's be honest, the Vikings will probably trade it, so it'll be either more money or less money. But you're going to have to account for those guys too. So do you find a trade partner for Alexander Madison? Do you move on from Harrison Phillips, even though you have a really weak defensive line, because he'll save you $6.5 million on the cap. Not an advantageous situation, not an advantageous move to make, but it's a move you could make. Byron Murphy would save you $5.3 million. These aren't moves I'm advocating for. This is just what you're looking at. Harrison Smith, $11.38 million. And does over the cap, they do not have a retire button, but you can maneuver some of these guys. Justin Jefferson right now is a $19.2 million cap hit. Guess what? You extend him, you could drop that to about $6 million. So you could save $13 to $14 million right off the bat. Move that money into future years, essentially make that whole thing a signing bonus, and there you go. And then you can free up that money now. And the reason why you free up money now and pay more later, cap's going to significantly go up, right, Odie?
Yeah, but it's gone up over time anyways. And they're banking on that. But it's how significant, when will the gambling money hit, all that sort of stuff is going to play into it. But agents already know that, so they're inflating prices across the board already. Can't wait to see some of these quarterback extensions that are going to come out this season. Jordan Love may become one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league. I'm all for it. They're not paying him enough, pay him twice that much, and put Green Bay in a hard spot for the rest of his career. I'm all for that. But it's going to be interesting. Yes, they can move money. That's what Spielman did. Spielman moved money. And that's why we're on the hook for 20% of the available cap to pay now if those guys aren't brought back. I'd rather be healthier, where there was the days of old when we'd front load contracts, and then we were always in good cap health. Those went bye-bye under Spielman. So it's nice when you could go out there, you're talking about free agency filling holes, go out there and get the best guard that's on the market to play left guard. That would be sweet, right? That's a hole filled. Go out and get a defensive tackle. Go out and get a corner. Go out and get whomever you want. If you could be able to afford it, go do it. And then select that talent in the draft. But we're not in that position because of bad decisions made by previous administrations trying to extend their jobs. And we're suffering for it.
Yeah, and it's a difficult proposition when you're having those conversations, because you have to have a really delicate balance. Odie, you're okay
here, Odie.
Yeah, he does not want to be in here. He wants to go downstairs, and Mondays are rough on Odie. They really are. Plus, he's very itchy. That was a sound I've never heard out of Odie before, but he just laid down, so I'm hoping he'll be okay for at least a little bit. This will probably be a little bit of a shorter show today, because it's a big picture discussion, and we're not going to get into a lot of the nitty gritty, mainly because the nitty gritty, we're going to get to a lot of that when the time comes. With free agency, we're going to talk a lot about, different position groups when we get closer, because we're going to know more about where the Vikings are at. We're going to know more about the draft classes, and that plays into it too. Because if the draft class is really strong and the free agent class is really weak, maybe you don't pay a guy in free agency, and maybe you just wait until like the third or fourth wave, and you take a veteran to start right away, and you take a guy in the draft that can learn behind him and then take over. So there's a lot of different schematic elements here. And those schematic elements all add up and matter. And I think that it makes it a really interesting conversation when you have it all encompassing, because that all encompassing element matters. And it's not as simple as, I believe this guy is a better player. Well, of course, you're going to believe some people are better than others, because that's just the nature of football itself. But it's also about being able to make it work with the money. Making it work with the money is also just as important, because it doesn't matter if I think, hey, this player is better. Well, if you can't make it work with the money, it doesn't matter. You have to make it work financially. And that's where these conversations get increasingly difficult. And I'm going to have to go get Mr. Odie because he's not having a good time, Dave. He is just not.
He's being a drama queen today, which is cool. Hopefully you can get him on camera. That'd be awesome. Yes, it's how they're going to play with it and how they're going to arrange money is going to be interesting because we're getting further and further into the Kwesi Adofo-Mensah management reign. First year, I'm willing to give it up because the Wilfs told him do it this way. Second year, there was some improvement, and you saw more of what he did. Third year, which is this offseason, you may see even greater improvement in what he does. I'm curious to the approach and how he's going to go about it. We won't know. We're going to speculate between now and then like crazy. But it's going to be interesting to see how he does. Now, on the thumbnail, I put him both and O'Connell because O'Connell is going to be advocating for all sorts of things along with him. But it's ultimately up to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and how he manages to build this roster up to get even close to the 4 teams or to the teams we saw this weekend, 8 teams we saw this weekend play football. And can we get to that level?
Yeah, I think we can. I think we have a good base to get to that level. Sorry, I kind of showed off my legs there for a second. I wanted to give everybody a shot of Mr. Odie, but he was not in an advantageous space, so we kind of gave up really quickly. I think the Vikings are closer than some will want to admit because at this point in time, when you see your division rivals thriving, it's easy to doom and feel bad. But at the end of the day, it's a week-to-week league. And because it's a week-to-week league, or sorry, year-to-year league, you can't just look at it, a 7-10 season where you lost all but 2 games by 1 score. So the Vikings went 6-8 in 1-score games after being 11-0 the year prior. Well, if you go 6-8 in 1-score games, you can look at it and be like, okay, well, why did we go 6-8 1-score games? Turnovers and injuries, both of which are fluky year over year. You can't count on like injuries happening to that level every single year. You can't count on turnovers being the same every single year. So if you can stay a little healthier and you can protect the football a little better, all of a sudden a 7-10 record can become 11-6 and you're dancing.
Yeah, but are you competing at the level we saw yesterday and Saturday? I don't think so. There are still
why not? Why not?
Because we don't have there isn't, when you have a quarterback that checks down rather than goes for it when the pressure is on, you're not going to see wall-to-wall games where they're exchanging touchdowns in every single drive.
I'm gonna stop you there, Dave. I think that narrative's dead. I think there are instances where Kirk still reverts to that, but as a whole, that's not who he is anymore.
Overall, Kirk's been with the team 6 years, won 1 playoff game. That is if we re-up him, hey, everybody loves Kirk. Great guy. Loved it. Fantastic. His persona has grown over the last couple of years. Absolutely fantastic. But 1, I think he's over the age where quarterbacks fall flat on their face and go over the hill. And 2, he's never proven that he is that kind of quarterback. Whether it be, he's definitely not Pat Mahomes or any of the other top quarterbacks in the AFC. Not even close. I'd compare him to Dak Prescott in a heartbeat, yes. But there isn't the competition level. There isn't the drive or desire that is demonstrated every week to go beat the other team down. And that may be part coaching. Blame it on O'Connell. When was the last time we blew out a team? And it's been forever. We want to be able to see a team that could score almost at will. Go back to the Denny Green era, right? Denny Green didn't care about defense because he was going to score every time his offense got the ball. That was his philosophy. We need that philosophy. I preached all last season, at the beginning of the season, they should have a 30-point minimum goal for each and every game. They didn't come close to reaching that goal. Make it so your defense is almost irrelevant. You know, you want a great defense. Oh, by golly, we do, right? And we think Flores did a great job with what he had for as long as he could before some of those injuries started to hit. But on the other side of the ball, build your pride by being able to score points. And scoring points, you know, every chance you touch the ball. And it just doesn't seem to be there. Whether it be lack of interior offensive linemen, quality play, right? And you can't tell me, oh, yes, Dalton Risner didn't give up a single sack. Oh, yeah. But how did he run block? How was our run game? It stunk. These are things that must be fixed. And it's an attitude thing. Now, we're all looking at Detroit heading towards the NFC Championship. Happy for Detroit. They haven't been there since forever. Okay, great. But they do play, or at least there's some players that play a little dirty on there. But the attitude of we're going to go make sure that you know we've played you is there. I admire that. You want to be able to put your best effort out on the field every week, week in and week out, and let the league know you're here, you're serious, you're going to compete. And I didn't see it this season. I didn't see it last season, right? Last season, 13-4, but all those one-score games, oh my God, were fraudulent. This year, 7 and whatever, and all those one-score games. But did they mean anything? No. We were still only 7 wins. Yes, injuries play a factor. Granted, and that shit happens. It reminded me of 2016. But you need a mentality change. You need people that are willing to go out there and just totally dominate. It's the type of sport. It's no different than the military. You want to go out there, kill things, and blow up things, right? And a football team should think the same way, right? That they're going to go out there, score points, and they're going to ram that football down everybody's throat. I don't see that. I don't see that on how the team is constructed. I don't see that from the coaching. I don't see it at all. I don't see a way to get there quickly because of all the cap situation. And the only way you're going to start is within free agency and finding a few of those key leaders you need to, and then nail the draft. Do you see that happening this year?
Well, I think your calculations on some of this are a little off base. Like, look, we can have a deeper conversation about this, but essentially, you have all these one-score games because of luck. And luck in itself is something that you just can't count on year over year. And that's why I talked about the turnovers and the injuries. Like, they're not going to be consistent year over year, and there's going to be that added variable. I do think some of kind of how you've kind of laid things out is, I get it, but I also think I'm trying to think of the right word. I don't think it's necessarily plausible in the way that I felt you were framing it. Look, a win is a win, and I would love to see them throw up 40 burgers every single week. But it's also becoming more increasingly difficult because of the shift back to defensive football and how teams are trying to combat these high-powered passing offenses, going back to running a lot of too high shells. And then you have like the offenses themselves. Like I would love just juggernaut offense, but I just don't think that we're going to be able to have that constructed within the next few years. Look, we had a top 15 scoring defense, and we had an offense that was capable of putting up 30 every single week, but you're not going to be able to put up 30 every single week. That's just not like it's a good goal. But I think that as a general expectation, I think is for lack of a better term, unfair. I think the Vikings are in a good spot. You get a couple players who can help improve some of the holes on this team. You adapt the scheme a little bit on defense, and you find the quarterback, and you could be off and running really, really quick. I don't think like we're this far away team, and I don't think there's this bad mentality. Like I think we look at things too much in a Madden sphere where we want to just win 70-3 every single time. I get that way when I play in NCAA 14 because I just want to whip people's butts, but their passing schematics are just a little too difficult and annoying. Where a running or a linebacker that's not even facing the ball jump up and all of a sudden get a pick. But I think we're fine. I think we're in a good spot. I don't think we need this massive shift that I felt like you were advocating for. I think we're good. We just need to tighten some things up.
We'll agree to disagree.
Well, I don't know if Odie's agreeing with you or agreeing with me, but I can tell you he's not agreeing with something. Odie, you're going to get to go soon, buddy. All right. Let's talk about the next portion of this conversation. All right. And the next portion of this conversation is my latest mock draft. And I dropped it yesterday, Sunday afternoon, because I'm like, you know what? Why not? Let's get some reading material during these games. And the way I attack these mock drafts is going to be different from a lot of people. What?
Just to let the viewers know, just like last year and the year before, we're working towards having live mock drafts on the show. Mm-hmm.
Yes, we will.
I just had to change up a bunch of stuff because we no longer have copyrights to the music we used last year.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about it. I use these mock drafts specifically to look at situations and to look at, okay, why does this make sense? Why could this happen? If this happens, what's the cause and effect of it? And the first one, what happens if one of the top receivers is there at 11? I don't think it's going to happen, but I also don't think it's crazy. And the reason why we're looping this into the conversation, because you want to fill holes in free agency and take talent in the draft. And if a great talent like a wide receiver of Malik Nabers' caliber is there, and Mateo, I saw you asking earlier, we're talking about it now. I had the Vikings taking LSU wide receiver Malik Nabers. We talked about him with Connor Rogers of NBC Sports. Really talented football player, and he can do a little bit of everything for you at a very high level. Great yards after the catch, can go and attack the ball in the air, tracks it really well. Great receiver on all three levels. That's the kind of guy you want to add to your football team. If he ends up being there, what if the Vikings don't say no? What if they say, you know what, this guy's just too good to pass up? Let's take him. Let's take him and figure the rest out. So what happens if that occurs? In this simulation, quarterbacks are all gone. And maybe nobody's offering to give you a package good enough to trade back. All right, let's just take the guy. The Lions got chastised for
quarterbacks are gone. Also, top edge rushers, the top two are gone. Offensive tackles have gone.
Yeah,
that leaves you with Nabers.
The situation here is that Nabers is here, and like the Lions got chastised in 2006 because they took wide receivers in the first round in 3 of 4 drafts. Well, the last one they took was a Hall of Famer, and it was Calvin Johnson. So if you find the right guy and you believe he's that good, you just take him and you just deal with it. You deal with the fallout. You deal with, I still have a hole here. I still have this. I still have that. Well, now I have a new version of 3 deep where my number 3 wide receiver could be a number 1 future on about 25 different teams. Now we're projecting a little bit, but it all matters. If you get talent, just get the talent and figure it out. That's what you have to do. It's a little different than a sport like basketball, where if you have no big man, but there's this all-star wing. Well, then you're going to have to trade one of your wings to go get that center. Like that's kind of how this works. So they ended up taking Neighbors. And then I was able to nab JJ McCarthy in the second round to be that quarterback of the future. And I think the Vikings, we have to trade back up to get him. I don't think they'll have to trade back from 11. I mean, if they do trade back from 11, I think you can make that work as well. But I think you can get McCarthy in that late first, early second round window, at least as of right now. We'll see how things go throughout the process because we all know that can change. So then you got your quarterback.
If he falls in that window, I'd love to trade up in the 30, 31, 32 to get that fifth-year option.
Yeah, same. And then the next two picks, defensive tackles. Florida State defensive tackle Braden Fiske. Good football player. Lacks a little bit of the explosiveness, but has the motor. And I think could be a really nice rotational guy. And then Clemson defensive tackle Tyler Davis plays more of a nose, but is a little bit more explosive. And I think you could utilize him at different areas of the defensive line. You have Clemson defense. We just talked about him. Rutgers cornerback Max Melton, high upside athlete. His brother Bo is playing for the Packers and did some damage to the Vikings on New Year's Eve. Kentucky running back Ray Davis adds to the running back room. And you need to get somebody to fortify the room. I just don't know how you go about it. Colorado State tight end Dalen Holker. You need to get another tight end to the room. If you think that Nick Muse is that guy, you can be fine with 3, but I think you should try and get a 4th. And Holker is a great pass catcher, needs a little bit of development as a blocker, but he's got the build for it. And you can always use weapons going down the seams. Kansas edge Austin Booker went at 179 to the Vikings. The dude has less than 600 career snaps, transfers from the U of M, long, super freak, athletic. We just don't know what he's going to be because he has almost no tape. So you're really betting on traits, and this is a great spot to do it. Lastly, Florida center Kingsley Aguakun. Talented player, strong, can play all 3 interior positions, and that's what you need for a backup. So it's not a perfect draft, and there's no such thing as a perfect draft unless you're drafting every single player and they all go in the Hall of Fame. But when you end up taking these guys early, and that really has a ripple effect down the line, because if you take Jared Verse right away, you're probably not taking 2 defensive linemen in round 4, and that changes the impact of the entire draft. So that's why we have these conversations, because they all impact each other and they all matter, and it's a giant snowball. And if you end up taking that wide receiver at 11th overall, it can really impact you down the line. Yeah, I think with the offensive line, I'm more worried about the depth than I am about the starters. I will say I'm not paying Dalton Reisner $8 million a year to be my starting left guard. I don't think he's worth that. I don't think with what this team is. I think you could pay Blake Brandel the restricted free agency tender, put him in there, and I think you'd be just fine. So I'm more worried about getting the depth players on the O-line than I am anybody else. Bradbury's fine. You're giving him $4.5 million a year to be average to above average, and he's going to have a couple stinker plays here and there. But that's what you get when you don't have Jason Kelce. Like, if you have Jason Kelce, then you don't have to worry about anything. But I think he's fine for what he is and what he's getting paid.
I don't know if Taylor Swift would say that. Supposedly that was the first time she met him.
I'm not surprised.
And what a first impression.
I'm sure she was warned all about him. He's just a big 10-year frat boy. Look, that's me if I were to go to a tailgate too, I would be having that kind of fun. So I don't blame him. But yeah, it's this whole conversation about how to structure things and how you have to look at things in free agency and how to attack and do all these different things, I think is an important conversation and important to understand. Because it's not just as simple as I need to bring in this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy. Well, all of a sudden you're $40 million over the cap. Uh-oh. Now you have to figure that part out. It's about structuring things in as smart of a way as you possibly can. And I think that's going to be really interesting how the Vikings might be able to do that. I hope they find a way to bring in Christian Wilkins, the Miami defensive tackle, because that would be that game wrecker on the defensive line that they desperately need. And it could make a really, really, really big impact on the entire defense. I think if you have a really good player like Harrison Phillips, you have a great player like Christian Wilkins, that third guy can just be average. He can be Jonathan Bullard. He can be Dean Lowry. Like, it doesn't matter nearly as much because you have two really good to great players joining them. And then you have Danielle Hunter at one edge, figure out what you do at the other edge. Now you're feeling a lot more comfortable about that defensive front. It's not flawless, but you're feeling better. Who knows what you're going to get from Jaquan Roy next year? Who knows if Pat Jones can actually make that step forward and be that starter opposite Danielle Hunter? I don't think he will. But these are questions that they're going to ask internally and try to figure out how they're going to allocate these resources. And I'm very fascinated to see how it goes about. And we're going to have conversations as we hear information from inside the building. We're going to have conversations as we see Senior Bowl, which I will be at next week. We're going to have conversations based on the combine. And it's all going to tell a story about what the Vikings could, would, or should do moving forward. But you have to take things into perspective where you have to prioritize the holes first with free agency and then talent in the draft. And that is how teams end up continuing to stay good. Yes, they also sometimes get lucky. Hey, the best player on the board is the position we desperately need. But you have to hit on the picks and you have to be smart about how you spend every single dollar. It's how the Chiefs have stayed good. It's how the Bills have stayed good. It's how the Ravens have stayed good. The Niners are just a weird case because they give up a bunch of assets and it doesn't even matter because they find a guy in the 7th round who can play the position and they're paying him peanuts. The guy has a roommate. So you look at everything all encompassing. And that's that. We're gonna continue to look forward. And we're going to continue to do that. And Wednesday, probably taking a look at the Senior Bowl, taking a look at how to look at it, what matters, what doesn't, how this impacts the whole scouting process, how this impacts how teams view players. The Vikings have an assistant that's going to be a defensive coordinator down in Mobile, and Durante Jones, passing game coordinator and defensive backs coach. So he's going to get a firsthand look at all the guys on the national team. There's a lot of things that we're going to have moving forward. We're going to have some SKOL searches this week and even some content next week while I am stuck in Mobile, Alabama. We're going to have some fun. We're going to have some fun. Don't forget, 2 old bloggers every Saturday through the end of the playoffs, then moves to Sundays. And on top of that, don't forget to check out our podcast feed where we have more stuff, including stuff from Purple and Gold for Days, Justin Day, as well as the NFC North show that Dave joins with other members of FFSN. We're going to have a lot of fun this offseason, and we are going to do a lot on these NFL draft prospects. I just watched Drake May this afternoon, so we're going to have a conversation about him soon. When?
Impressed?
Yeah. When that conversation happens, you'll have to subscribe, and ring the bell to know when that occurs, because he's going to get his own episode of SKOL Search, and we're going to have a really good conversation. Until then, make sure you like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're almost at 2,000 subscribers. Really close. Help us get over that hump. And also the podcast feed, because there's going to be unique stuff on both. Till then, I'm Tyler. He's Dave. SKOL Vikings.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love, our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone.